Um, Thanks so much for having us. We're really happy to be here. I'm Alyssa Pers. I am a Senior Associate Dean in Trinity College and direct the Office of Health Professions Advising. I'm also a faculty member in the biology department, and I'm here with my wonderful colleague who will introduce herself and get us going.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you joining us at Duke this fall. I'm Brittany Moorhack. I'm the Associate Director of Health Professions Advising. Dean Pers and I are just going to walk through some of the things that you might want to get started thinking about now as you prepare to come to Duke as a pre-health student. So the Office of Health Professions Advising actually serves a lot of different health professions. While we have a lot of pre-med students, we also serve students who are pursuing careers in dentistry, veterinarian medicine, physical therapy, pharmacy, optometry, nursing, physician assistant, genetic counseling, and occupational therapy. One thing we do want to note is that we do have really active student organizations for our dentistry, veterinary, and physical therapy. So if you are considering one of those pathways, when you get to Duke, you'll want to consider joining those student organizations. They're a great place to meet other students who are pursuing your pathways and also get really good advising, both for the advisors, from the advisors, but also from peers. And how do we work with first-year students as they're coming in? The first thing that you're going to want to spend some time on is our prepare section of our website. We know that our website is really dense. There's lots of good information we want to get to you all. And so we do encourage you to spend some time to look at the prepare section. There's lots of good information around course selection, what medical schools are looking for. And it's just a good way to kind of acclimate to what the expectations are for your pre-health pathway. Sign up for our listserv. Dean Pers has just put up the QR code. So if you have a phone, take it out, take a picture. We'll also make sure that we put it up later in this presentation. We send out a weekly newsletter that has everything from announcements for our office, opportunities for student organizations, volunteering opportunities, and then as you progress through your time at Duke, even gap year opportunities. This is the best way to stay up to date with the things that are going on in our office and the different opportunities to get involved on campus. So please make sure you sign up for this. And then lastly, advising. We have a couple of different ways we spend a lot of time with first years. So at the beginning of the school year, we'll start weekly Zoom drop-ins. You can drop in and talk with one of the advisors about any questions you have. We run a couple of welcome events when you do come to campus, and then we host programs throughout the academic year.
All right, so we're trying to stick to a pretty high level overview today. So I want to talk about some things to consider as you're coming to Duke as pre-health students. Probably one of the most prominent things you'll notice on our website are the lists of courses that you'll need for various professions. We do have some links under that prepare section. If you are not pre-med, it's pretty easy to find the course selections for pre-medical students, but we do have links for several other professions, so keep digging for those. In addition to the courses, especially as you come to campus, we'll start talking about ways to gain experience that's not only valuable for preparation for professions, but also for your development as a human being and a student who's actively making decisions. The other thing we're going to introduce you to in time are core competencies. While these come from the Association of American Medical Colleges, they're competencies that are relevant to all the health professions and are probably a little less obvious than the lists of courses and experiences. But one of the ways I want to get you thinking today is that your courses in combination with your experiences are going to help you to lead to the development of these competencies. And when you apply, it's simply not enough to have completed courses and list experiences in your application, but you're really going to need to start talking about how you've developed those competencies through these experiences. The other thing that I think is really obvious to students at this stage is that there are lots of requirements. It's really easy to approach your preparation like a checklist. What I want to start to highlight for you, though, is something that's a little less visible. And that's that you've got choices. So in addition to the required courses, you get to pick a major. So don't just pick a major because it overlaps well with those requirements, unless that's the best combination of courses for you to take. You can take a major in something that complements those requirements really well. There are also broad categories of experience, but lots of room for you to decide what populations of people do you want to serve in the community? How do you want to conduct your research? So don't forget, you've got choices. And it's a really great way to utilize the services of our office by coming and talking to us about those choices. Sometimes we talk to students who feel like they have to do what other students are doing because they're going to be left out, or they're not doing the right thing, or they come to us and they want to know, what's the list of things medical schools want me to do? Just tell me what it is. It's not that simple. You're going to be an interesting and exciting candidate if you make good choices that are good for you. So that enthusiasm and that experience comes through when you apply. But we know it can be really overwhelming when you're getting started. So today we're really trying to start with this basic overview, get you thinking about using our website and our resources. And then as you work with us, once school starts, we'll really start to confront some of these choices and develop that individuality. So to keep it pretty simple, let's think about things you want to do before you arrive. One of the most obvious things is we're going to come back in the beginning of July because you've got to register for classes before things get started. It's not necessary, however, to create a 4-year plan of classes while you're at Duke. Most of you are going to pick a chemistry course and maybe a math class, and then you've got a couple of electives. So this is a great place for focus, great place to meet other requirements for majors, and we'll talk about those kinds of constructs in the next webinar in more detail. As we've already mentioned, please sign up for our listserv. We'll shoot out some resources that are really great for getting started and thinking about classes and placement. We'll have a whole series in August that will start to onboard you into the Duke campus community, resources outside of our office that you can use. So it's really useful to get signed up for that now. And then, as Ms. Morhack said, review our website. The two things we haven't really talked about are I want you to reflect now as you get off this webinar, maybe as you're sitting here listening to us, why did you choose Duke? There was probably something that drew you to our institution and our campus. And what I don't want you to do is lose track of that because you're also pre-med. You can have a great experience at Duke, engage in those resources, activities, opportunities that help you chose Duke, and they're probably going to be great preparation for the health professions as well, because they help you to develop as a person. So don't bypass those because you feel like you've got all these other things you have to do. If you do them both, you're going to be a better candidate and applicant. And then the last one is shift this mindset from getting things out of the way to being pre-health is going to be like running a marathon. Most of our students are going to take at least 4 years to prepare and then apply. Most people will do it or the shortest you can do it is after 3 years. So I want you to expunge from your vocabulary the phrase, get things out of the way. If you're approaching a required class or an experience that way, you probably need to step back and say, why would a med school or a professional school care that I have statistics? What's the value of it? And then go into that class with the mindset of, I need to get that value from it. And if I don't know what that is, then I need to talk to school admissions offices, my pre-health advisor, somebody else to try to understand why in the heck a future doctor needs physics or whatever the course or experience is. If you take this sort of mentality to it, you won't get in a rush, which is where we see a lot of errors accumulate, and it'll really help you feel more relaxed and more confident throughout your preparation, and then also when it's time to apply. All right, so that is, and then just a reminder, come back on July 6th with us. Same place you signed up for this one, you can sign up for that one under, I think it's Summer Engagement in the Blue Book. All right, so with that, we've got our listserv request QR code back up here. I saw lots of questions coming in through the Q&A, so we are happy to start taking questions.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I love this question. Is it typical for your pre-health advisor to consistently check in with you, or is it more on the student to schedule meetings with a pre-health advisor?
Why don't you go ahead, Ms. Moorhack?
So our office is what we call voluntary, meaning you can come to see us when you want to. What we do really encourage folks, and this is coming from years of advising Duke pre-health students who will say on the back end, if I came to see you once a semester or so, I felt better. And by better, meaning I felt more on track. I kind of had a sense of what I was doing. I felt more reassured in the choices that I was making and kind of what was coming ahead. It also helps that we know you better then. It means that we can help you make individualized choices that are best for you. So while we are absolutely not going to tell you have to come in and see us, coming in to see us once a semester or so is usually what most students do that feel really good about that choice.
Awesome. Does pre-health advising office offer ways for students to connect with upperclassmen or alumni for advice and guidance? I think particularly with the pre-health track.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. To start with, we would recommend reaching out to some of the peer success leaders. We try to group peer advising with one cadre of students. And I know when I'm talking to students about, how does math in high school compare to math in college? They're some of our best resources for students to talk to. We will also utilize a student organization at our medical school called MedMap that is both Duke alumni as well as students from other schools, but who are at Duke Med, as well as our alumni that are at other schools. And they're a great resource for students, especially as you get closer to the application stage of things. And we will often utilize them for panels to offer a student perspective on being pre-health.
Is it possible to double major while doing the pre-med track if I want to explore multiple areas of study?
Ooh, I want to validate and love on that word explore. There is no right or wrong major when you're a pre-med student or a pre-health student. And so is it possible to double major? Yes. Does double majoring look better to medical school or other health profession schools? No. So what I encourage students to think about is if they have early interest in multiple specialties or areas of interest, like explore those as a first and second year. And then as you progress through your time at Duke, kind of decide how much depth and specificity you want to have in a subject. And usually students will start to find that they'll make different choices based on their interests, but also their long-term plans. So double majoring is possible, but it isn't something that you have to do to be competitive or anything else of that nature.
In the vein of exploration, what if a student doesn't know yet if they want to go to medical or dental school? How can they figure that out while they're here and with the support of your office?
Yeah, that's a great question. While we'll talk about what a typical student will take in the first semester, we also like to remind students it's not necessary to take any pre-health classes in your first semester. So especially if you're unsure about taking chemistry or calculus, you can push off those classes. What you might want to do instead is take courses in other areas that are interesting to you, just to do some of that exploring that we just talked about. You can also reach out to providers. This summer is a great time. If you've got a dentist that you have a good relationship, see if they'll let you shadow them. If you're a provider that you normally see will let you shadow, it's another great way to just start to take a look at the profession. I always remind students, don't go in and be in awe of the technology or the things they get to do, but remember to ask the questions. What is it like to do this work day in and day out? What do you like about your job and what do you hate about it? And just remember that, the responses to those things are going to be different for everybody. You know, some people may be able to tolerate certain things that are tedious to others. So you always have to kind of apply what they say back to yourself and assess, is this something that's worth taking some required classes in this next semester? Maybe not enough at this stage. I need to get more information, maybe volunteer with some patients through a service learning class or just general community service to make sure that I want to work with people. I think a lot of people come to this thinking, it's so many years in school and there's so many requirements, I got to be in a hurry to get started. Those folks that pause and are reflective at the beginning or take the opportunity in their first year to explore and be really certain, by the time they're applying, they bring a maturity that's really appealing to the schools, and their applications just express this readiness. We are more likely to see problems with applications from somebody that came in, thought they were certain, were inflexible, only met requirements, only did what they thought they needed to do, and never stopped and did this sort of questioning. So all of you, even if you think you're certain about what you're going to do, pause periodically, ask yourself if this is still the right thing. How do you know it? That investment in reflection is going to pay dividends when it's time to write about these things, which is a tough thing to do. But when you have to write about it, if you've paused, you've reflected, you've talked to people, it's going to be much easier, and you're going to be much more advanced in your ability to communicate, your certainty, and that's a really important criteria when you're applying.
Are students able to get research experience in their first year at Duke?
Yeah, I think we have lots of students who get research experience. I think that it's not something students have to do in their first year. So one thing you'll hear our office talk about is when you look at the multitude of choices you have to make, they're just that, choices. So some students will start with research because they're really excited about it. Some students will start with community service because that's where they're really excited. So it's about just making choices where you feel like you can find an opportunity to grow and feel engaged in the community at Duke. I don't think that a successful pre-health student needs to start research their first year, but we have some students that's a really good fit for what they're going to do for their first year.
I know that there was a comment, part of this was answered, but I wanted to ask you all too. Someone is looking online and trying to figure out, what do I take if I'm pre-health? Should they go to the pre-health guidance in the prepare section of the website, or should they talk to their college advisor as they start to think about this first semester of course registration?
Both. So the pre-health website, especially a handout that's at a very high level in the prepare section, which is tips for choosing classes in your first semester, will orient you to what are the options. Most of our students will start with something like a chemistry class and or a calculus class, but the actual results will vary based on what are the AP credits you have. What else do you have going on? If you're a student in Pratt, that may or may not fit with where you are and what your requirements are there. You also want to talk to your college advisor. While they will not likely be an expert in pre-health advising, they're going to do things like make sure that you're not taking 4 classes that are all requirements, all somebody else's idea of things you got to get done. They're going to make sure that you're going back to what are those academic interests, and are you representing those in your requirements? For some of you that want to major in a natural science, pre-health will overlap well with that. So maybe they're going to push you to take a course in an area that just gives you a break from those things. So they're really going to help make sure that you've got a course that's balanced in size, that you're thinking about other kinds of things besides just getting things out of the way. So they're going to be really helpful with those other things as well. You may have to talk to other people. So if you're not sure about what chemistry class to take based on your AP credit or your previous experience, you may need to reach out to the director of undergraduate studies in chemistry. And that's okay, because maybe you took chemistry during the pandemic and an AP test that was shortened and you got a 5, but you don't feel confident about starting in organic chemistry. That director of undergraduate studies is going to be better equipped to reassure you about the results from students that have been in a similar situation, or say, this other class may be, a good compromise position if you're not feeling confident and sure with that placement. So I think it's a really good time to point out that Duke has got a huge network of people that are advisors. I try to encourage advisors and students to not get too focused on picking the right person for the right question, but find someone. Your college advisor is going to be a really easy, accessible person. Find them. They'll direct you to other resources if they can't help you, and pre-health may be one of those.
While we're talking about APs, a student asks, even though Duke accepts certain AP credits, those same credits might not be accepted as much by medical schools. So should we redo courses, for example, statistics, chemistry, biology? I think the assumption is if they're also pre-med requirements.
Great question. And let us introduce you to our favorite answer for most questions, which is it depends. You will hear us as an office say that time and time again. It depends for a lot of different reasons. The first is it might depend on the class. So for example, with our chemistry sequence, you may not need to retake a course or do anything different. You might just need to follow your sequence, which is outlined on our website and on chemistry's website for some guidance on your placement. Biology has a placement indicator for your biology course, whereas things like statistics and some other courses, we may encourage you to take a class either alongside that AP credit or take one extra course, depending on what your state schools require of you and any other strong schools of interest. So we like to call prereqs and AP rules fiction. And that's because realistic fiction is what Dean Purse calls it, because it will change. And so what you look at today might be different by the time you apply. And so we'll just keep an eye on those things. The good news for many of you is you won't have to make some of those finite decisions until you're a junior or senior. And we'll just kind of double check at that point where you're sitting with your goals and what your schools are kind of looking for at that point, and then make some fine decisions at that point. So that is a very long-winded way of saying that follow your placement for your early classes, and we'll just keep an eye on it throughout your time at Duke.
Wonderful. There is a question here about hearing that some courses at Duke are notoriously hard, right? Maybe like a physics, something like that. Is it possible to take them at other institutions? How do students approach that if maybe one part of pre-med requirements is not really their forte? How would you advise that student?
Yeah, so I think schools have an expectation that you take the majority of their requirements at your home institution. So, we want to do this within reason. One of the things that we've observed over recent years is the number of requirements keeps expanding. As they add things, they don't take anything away. So it keeps expanding. That's one of the reasons why it's become more difficult to apply at the end of 3 years and go straight from undergraduate to a lot of professional schools. But it also, to my mind, opens up some reasonable reasons for taking courses in the summer, taking courses away from your home institution. I always caution students, if the only reason you're taking courses away from Duke is to avoid the rigor of Duke, you may get exposed at some point, and that's not necessarily something you want to communicate to a school. But if you find, I want to study abroad fall of my junior year, in order to do that, complete other kinds of requirements, I really need to fit physics in the summer. It's lower cost to do it at home. Now you've got multiple good reasons. You're opening up a positive opportunity. So that can be a reasonable thing. I also know I'll get a question if I don't acknowledge it. We have a lot of students that are taking courses away from Duke through the interinstitutional agreement. I feel a little uneasy about this because as more and more students do this, the more schools are likely to notice and ask why. You know, it's a possibility. It's an option a lot of students exercise. That one I feel like is to avoid rigor and is a little bit harder to defend than say doing something at your state institution during the summer, but lots of our students were choosing to do it.
These segues are working perfect. There were a few questions about studying abroad. Can I study abroad and do the pre-med track? What does that look like?
Yes, please do. So earlier, Dean Purse talked about the AAMC core competencies, and one of them is culture and understanding that people come from different backgrounds. And I think that studying abroad is one of the multitude of ways that you can develop that competency. We see medical schools really valuing folks' time abroad as well. It just takes good planning. As Grace alluded, there was a good segue from this idea about taking courses during the summer, because you do have to do a little of advanced planning to be able to go abroad. You can't take pre-med prereqs while you're abroad. So making sure that we have found time for you to take those courses either during a summer session or when you return, and just being aware of the timeline and how that might shift for going abroad. But we have lots of students who go abroad, have really meaningful time abroad, and come back and feel like it was a really good decision, not only for their pre-health journey, but also for them as people.
There are also a few questions about doing focus in pre-med. Is it hard to do both focus and fulfill the pre-med requirements, and particularly as they look at the first semester and there already being so many credits that are filled by focus courses? How do you advise students who also want to pursue pre-med track?
I'm so glad to get this question. I love focus. It is one of the best ways to launch your experience with peers, faculty, and intellectual engagement in college. I know those 2.5 courses feel like they're getting in the way of doing other things, but size-wise, they're a perfect foil to introductory chemistry and calculus classes, which are going to be large, and you're going to feel like, you know, a person lost in a sea of lots of other students. They're also the opposite of a broad intro class, which is going to cover a lot of topics at a fairly low level. You're going to be able to go deep and engage and be active in classes. Focus also will meet the first year seminar requirement, or if you're in Pratt, many times it will meet social science or humanities requirements. Those of you who are in Focus, when it's time to apply for summer programs and you need letters of recommendation, you don't have just one person, you know, well, you've got 2 faculty and maybe the third class director as well that can write in support of you. So don't get cold feet about focus. I know you may be feeling a little bit constrained about it, but it is a wonderful way to start your Duke experience, because it is a living learning community, and those seminar classes are deeply engaging, and it will set you up for all kinds of great things you can't imagine right now. I wish all of you could apply for Focus at this point. I checked the application deadline before this, because I would be telling you all to go apply if you still could.
For clinical experiences that students do or complete before they enter Duke, before their first year at Duke, can those be included on med school applications?
Great question. And unfortunately, the answer is no. I usually share with students that kind of when you get to Duke, everything that you've done prior to that, sort of we start back at zero for your application to medical school. I think there's a lot of value in everything all of you have done up until you start at Duke. And so what I usually phrase to my advisees is it's your roots or your trampoline. It's either what you come back to because it's your motivation, or it's what propelled you forward to making the choices at Duke that you're going to make. Something that sparked a joy or an interest for you during your years in high school might be what you go look for more of while you're at Duke. And those are the things that are going to go on your application to medical school and be really meaningful helpful. I think it feels so relevant right now who you are in high school, but by the time we do your applications in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, depending on your timeline, a lot of those experiences feel further away, and medical schools are a little bit more interested in learning who you are at that moment. And so they're a part of your story, but they're not going to be the main focus of the story when we go to do that.
Are the requirements for an MD or PhD program the same as general medical school?
Yeah, for the most part, the kinds of courses you'll take are the same. Probably the biggest difference is you need to have a significant research experience, and most directors that I've spoken to define this as a minimum of 2 years of research. A lot of students feel like, oh, I've got to come with publications or things like that. Most of them say, research varies so much that even that's not a requirement. But that significant research experience and enough engagement in clinical settings and what your professional opportunities are from shadowing MD PhDs to be able to make the case, I need an MD. I need an MD and a PhD, so that you can clear both aspects of their admissions committees. And you can't be so enamored of research that they wonder, why do you need this MD thing? You sound like you'd be perfectly fine getting a PhD. So you've got to do enough of those other things to make the case, but it's the research that's the most important thing.
Can students work in a lab outside of Duke, like when they're home or the summer or abroad, and use that research to write a Duke thesis?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to this question. Do you, Dean, first?
Yeah, so you can't get academic credit in most cases for it. Like independent study credit has to be done with faculty at Duke, but there are departments that will let you do research elsewhere and graduate with distinction. So my home institution or department for biology, for instance, will allow this. This may be somewhat dependent on the individual department and where you're doing the research, but at least in one case I know of, it's possible.
And there's a similar question that just came in that ties together the last two questions. If a research project was started in high school, but continues while they're here at Duke, they take the next levels, can that be part of their med school application, despite it starting in high school?
Yes. And what we do for those experiences is we just talk about what you've done during your time at Duke, and we allude, sometimes stronger than others, that you're building off of experiences that started prior to getting to Duke.
There's two questions that are related to what the pre-health advisor can do. So can they help students find summer opportunities, and can they help students find extracurriculars here at Duke?
So I want to be careful about promising what we will do. We're not going to get on the internet and help you find opportunities. I think we're more likely to be better positioned to be a sounding board. Sometimes students will be like, I found these great opportunities, I'm not sure which one to do first. And oftentimes the students just articulating what they're excited about both. We hear it. We can hear where their enthusiasm is and where they're leaning. Sometimes we'll apply what we know about what med schools want or what they've got in the rest of their portfolio that will strengthen it. Our newsletter will be filled to the point of overwhelm with those kinds of summer opportunities, and we really like to refer students to other students about extracurriculars on campus, because they're just more knowledgeable about what the latest and greatest is. So for instance, this spring, we had a panel of leaders from a number of health-related student organizations to talk about not only what did the organization do and their experience, but also how to get started, what resources were available if travel off campus was required or things like that. So what I would say is we either assemble the information and push it out to you through our announcements, or through individual advising as we get to know students, we'll say, you know, based on what you're saying, this sounds like a really great place for you to start with community service because you either care about this population or you're intrigued to understand more about who they are as individuals and what challenges they're facing. And, you know, this sounds like a really growth opportunity, a really good growth opportunity for you.
I want to reiterate a few questions that have come up just because I know sometimes gears get going and students want to ask a question again. But can you just go over again, what is the process for how a student connects with pre-health advising? Do they get an advisor assigned? And how much can they engage over the course of the semester? Should they expect to reach out and there maybe be a wait time to when they can respond, or sort of a cap on how much they can interact with pre-health advisors?
You want to go back to our slide that has
That. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So for your first year, we offer weekly Zoom drop-ins, and those are a great way to come and get your questions answered. Those obviously may have a wait time. I think certain times of year, the wait time is a little bit longer than others, but we run those pretty regularly during the week. It's so you have more than one opportunity to drop in and get your questions answered. We also do welcome events and programming. And so you have lots of different types of opportunities to interact with us. First years, we really work in this group model. It builds a lot of community. It gets your questions answered pretty quickly and easily. And I think those are the things that are most important to us for you as first years, is to make sure you feel like you're getting those questions answered in a timely fashion.
In a similar vein, there are a lot of questions about specific courses, right? How do I get a course that meets this requirement, or I pick between this course and this course? So at this stage in the summer, can you give us the advisement about how they can find that info or be prepared to discern those questions?
Yeah, so I think those tips on choosing courses at Duke are a great place to get started. So that'll help you think about pre-health classes. Then, you know, in most cases, we're advising you about no more than 2 pre-health classes. So then you might want to talk to your college advisor or look at what's the advice everybody else is getting about how to form balanced schedules, explore possible majors, find areas of interest in things, meet those first year requirements. If you're in Trinity, if you're in Pratt, there's a little less wiggle room, but you know, figuring out what does a Pratt schedule look like, and then looking at our resources about, well, you know, that's probably going to be really reassuring that chemistry and calculus are both in there. So there's pretty good overlap between those things. But then, you know, coming to that next webinar with a whole set of questions after you've navigated placement and use the DUS. Again, I want to underscore, we're not going to tell you which chemistry class to take. We can read the stuff on the website just like you can, but you might want to tap into that expertise. And then, you know, if you're putting yourself into a more advanced chemistry class, maybe we want to think more carefully about the calculus or the other things in your schedule, but it's going to be not one person telling you what to do. It's going to be people offering you ways to think about your schedule. And then after you've collected that information, making the best possible choices for yourself. If you talk to peers and you talk to your college advisor and you talk to us and we're all like, whoa, that sounds like quite a first semester schedule, then you may want to take a step back and rethink things, what my priorities are, why are people reacting this way? At the end of the day, no one's going to stop you from doing whatever it is you're going to do schedule-wise. And so you're going to own whatever the outcomes are. So listen for the advice. We'll offer you both sides and things to think about. I'm losing track of what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, a lot of placement and how do I pick between this course and this course? And I wanted folks to hear that this is the time they can do some of that research and then also come prepared for next. webinar as well. What percentage of Duke pre-med pre-meds graduate in 4 years versus 5+? I think they're actually asking how many people taken a gap year. I think that's what they actually are asking.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think we track graduation. The last time we looked, which is actually going to be a full year ago, because that's how long it takes us to get data. I'm the data nerd in the office, so you'll keep hearing me talk about all the data stuff. About 80+% of our students take a gap year. I joke that about 80% of first years are going to come in telling me they're not going to take a gap year, and about 80% of you will. And that change happens over time. It is usually nothing necessarily coming from our office per se, as much as it is highlighting what medical schools are looking for. And when students are looking at the opportunities they can have at Duke, like Dean Purse said earlier, we want you to really embrace the reasons you chose Duke and be involved in those experiences. And a lot of those experiences will be easier to have if you take a gap year. And so for most of our students, they're just kind of looking at the timeline and going, oh, if I take a gap year, I can do a lot more. I can grow in the ways I want to grow. I'll be able to have the candidacy I want to have when I submit my application. And so the great majority of our students are going to take a gap year. That is a trend on par nationally. And it's just, I think, sort of a nod to what medical schools are looking for, and it's a lot. And I don't say that to be scary. I say that to be, they don't care if it takes you 3, 4, or 5 years. They want you to be prepared. And so most of our students will take a path that allows them to really embrace their time at Duke and be successful in the medical school cycle.
Someone asked something along the lines of, what is the one thing that you would tell pre-med students to think about now as they think about preparing an application at the end for med school?
I think I would jump in with, don't be in a hurry now to get to that point. If you skip over the opportunity to explore cultural anthropology or medical sociology or global health or whatever the cool thing is that you didn't get to do in high school, but you're curious about, you could wake up someday, past your junior year and realize, I'm finally getting to take this class now, and I really missed an opportunity to major in something I love, and it would be a wonderful complement, or it'd be a left turn into another profession. Both things happen. But I've been so invested in getting things out of the way, and I've been inflexible about that plan that I missed it, and now it's simply too late. And I really like to caution our students, you have cleared a tremendous hurdle getting in to Duke through such a selective school. There's no doubt in our minds that you can get into medical school or whatever the health profession is you want to do. I think it's really important that you establish over the next 3-4 years that that's the right door to pass through next. And if you miss that opportunity to do it, you really run the risk of waking up sometime on the other side of residency in debt and disenchanted and wonder, why did this happen? I thought this was like the brass ring everybody was reaching for. So don't miss that opportunity. You'll have more balanced schedules. You'll probably do better in your pre-health classes. You'll certainly be happier. Your mental health will be stronger if you take that time now. And, you can take 2 pre-health classes and 2 other things. So you can do both. You can be making steady progress. It's the students who get in a rush. And again, that's why I keep bringing this phrase of get things out of the way is not the mentality. It's those students that sometimes get pushed back further. They get low grades, or they have to repeat a course, or they weren't able to gain the experience they needed. So now they've got to take more time to do that anyway. If you do it all in balance, there's definitely a middle path to pursue these things. And I would recommend taking that from the beginning because it'll build your certainty, it'll build your narrative and your why, and make it easier to apply with confidence.
What sort of MCAT resources are available for students at Duke while they're here?
So our office doesn't endorse this single MCAT company or type of resource. We've seen lots of students be successful with things like self-studying, and we've seen students be really successful by taking courses. And so one thing we really focus on in our office is helping people choose the right timing for their MCAT and to think about what else they're doing around their MCAT studying, and then helping them, maybe start lightly having a conversation about what supports might be helpful for them. We do have some resources like an MCAT mini series to just kind of think about how you prep and do time management. And then we have the ARC, which is the Academic Resource Center, that you can also do some time management planning with. So there's no concrete one thing we're going to tell all of you to do, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to MCAT prep, just like there is no one size fits all for anything pre-health. But we think that the thing that's most helpful with students being successful is taking it at a time that makes sense for them and really knowing themselves as learners and selecting the right type of preparation strategy for them.
If a student chooses to take a gap year, will they still be able to receive advising from your office during that time?
That is such a great question. And yes, we recognize as we've encouraged students to take gap years that we need to extend our support. So we will work with students for 5 years after they graduate and write committee letters for 2 years after they graduate. And so we're very, I think, well set up to work with our alumni and keep tabs on them and stay in connection with them to support them.
We are close to the end of the questions, so if any students are listening and have other big picture questions, this is your time to chat, to type in the Q&A. But I'll read this one verbatim. For the 80% who do take a gap year, what percent do lab research versus something else? What do they do during that gap year? And if they're doing research in that year, are they doing it at Duke?
Great question. I don't have off the top of my head what percentage of our students are doing clinical research in their gap year, but our students are everywhere and anywhere. So we absolutely have students who are still at Duke. They tend to be students who have already had relationships in a lab and there's an opportunity for them to stay. I have students right now who are finishing up a gap year who didn't have a relationship and got hired when a lab was looking for someone as well. But we also have students all over the country doing lots of different things. So we have students who do gap years at the NIH for the ERNA program, which is a 2-year fellowship for research at NIH for students who are pursuing graduate education. So whether that's med school or a PhD, we have a lot of students who will end up in New York City doing research for either one of the large hospitals there or something like the special hospital for special surgery. And then we have lots of students working with patients. So whether they're scribing or they're a medical assistant or they're working as an EMT or an ED tech. We have students who will do things like volunteering. So the advising corps or some students will do Teach for America for 2 years. I'm trying to think what else, some of the more unique things that we've had students do. There's almost very little you can't do in your gap year. And I say that because you've already submitted your application. So if you have put together a strong candidacy, when you submit your application, that year is for you to do something that you can grow. And many of our students will continue to be immersed in experiences that are helping them prepare for a future career as a physician, but that might look different for each and every one of them.
When do you see that students usually start studying for the MCAT?
Yeah, this is a great question. And we recommend that you start when you see that you have completed all of the coursework that's on the MCAT. So oftentimes students will spend a semester or a summer studying for the MCAT. We recommend about 3 months, 300 hours, although there's some variation among students. But sometimes students are taking their final course or two while they're doing that MCAT prep. In summer, maybe because it's a little more compressed, they're less likely to be taking a class and more likely to be focused on that MCAT prep. But we kind of do that. We will have our students coming into their sophomore years map out a 4-year plan for themselves. And one of those questions is, okay, when are you done with these courses according to this plan? Now let's work backwards and think about MCAT and how does that interface with when you hope to apply and things like that.
Someone asked about the feasibility of taking a gap year for a low-income student.
A great question. I think it is feasible. One of the things each of us in our office do when we have students who know that they're going to take a gap year or exploring a gap year is to ask them what their needs and priorities are. So I might have some students who come in and say, you know, I need to be able to financially support myself during my gap year. So that's going to be our number one priority in choosing a gap year experience or job for you, is knowing that those things are factors that we're going to lead with. And so knowing that those, when you're willing and able to share with us those things, it helps us help you better. So it's definitely feasible. There's also different resources through the application cycle that can help with finances. So when you get to that part, when you get to the MCAT part, when you make sure you are touching base with us about the financial resources through the application process and the MCAT. And sometimes all those little things put together can make it feel a lot more feasible for folks.
We have come to the end of our questions, which is great timing. It's 4:55, but I want to see if either of you, Dean Pers, Ms. Morahack, have any other final comments that you want to leave students with. Or maybe all of these questions are the perfect summation.
I encourage everybody to adopt a pair of imaginary blinders, because sometimes you're going to need to put on some blinders and not pay attention to what other people around you are doing. Peers can be a great source of ideas and enthusiasm and encouragement, but sometimes you need to put on the blinders when you realize you're comparing yourself to other people. I used to watch in my introductory biology classes, students talk to each other. And I would sometimes see students like starting to cringe or, you know, feel bad because as they listened to a group of peers about what they were doing for research or service, I got the impression that they were sort of summing across all the other peers, like I need to be doing everything that every single one of these individuals is doing. You need to do what you need to do for yourself. So, you know, this is sometimes students will do a gap year because they need to spend more time on their classwork and have less time for gaining service experience, or are going to do research after they graduate. Everybody's on their own path. The most wonderful thing about the prevalence of gap years is they're no longer things that students do because there's something wrong with their candidacy. There are things the majority of our students do and some of our best applicants will do, and they will hands down make you the best possible applicant you can be. So just don't forget to put on those blinders and stay true to who you are. You will know when you're excited about an activity and not excited about one, and do the things that you're most excited about, because that will help you give this individual flavor to your application, and schools will see who you are and how you're different from other candidates, rather than trying to do the things that the people around you are doing.
I don't think my tip would be much different, which is we want you to be uniquely you. You're uniquely you as you start at Duke. Let Duke change you in all the good and wonderful ways it can. You know, get involved in the things that are exciting to you. And we're on the other side, knowing what that long path looks like. And if you're making choices that feel relevant to your preparation and feel good to you, and you're, you know, keeping them kind of in line and working alongside of our office through our programming and through our website and our emails and our advising, you're going to get to the place that you want to be. I love the phrase, it's a destination, it's a direction, not a destination. We don't know what each of your paths will look like. That's what's so exciting for us. You know, we support a couple hundred students applying to medical school and health professions programs every year, and no two applications look alike. And that's because no two of you are the same person. So spend your time now doing the things that feel important to you, because they'll make a difference on the other side.
I want to thank both of you so much for your time today. We're very appreciative for the opportunity for first year students or new students to hear from you and get your wisdom this early in the summer. So thank you also to our students who are here. If you are excited already to re-listen to this and hear the wisdom, give us a few days and we'll have the recording online. You'll be able to access that on the Blue Book site. The same way that you register, we're linking recordings there as well. And don't forget again about the next pre-health advising webinar on Thursday, July 6th at 4 p.m. Where our colleagues here will come back for even more in-depth information and make sure that you register for that webinar ahead of time. We hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for having us.